Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
We know school belonging is extremely important for mental health and their well-being, and also for successful school outcomes.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the author of 6 books about raising happy families and the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. Normally I would be here with Kylie, wife, mum to our 6 kids, and podcast co-host. But unfortunately, Kylie couldn't be with us for this conversation. Kylie just had some other things that she had to be doing. But I am, however, with somebody that I'm really excited to have a chat to about something that I find absolutely intriguing. You know how sometimes kids just belong at school. They've found their fit, they've found their friends, the philosophy's right, everything's working for them, and they really relish school. Now, if you're listening to me give that summary and thinking that's not my kids, it's probably not the highest percentage of kids that have that kind of experience where they really want to be at school every day because they feel that they belong. A lot of children don't belong. And my guest today is Dr. Kellyanne Allen. Kelly is a senior lecturer at the School of Education at Monash University and also a senior honorary fellow where I am at the Centre for Wellbeing Science in the Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne. Highly qualified, and Kelly's area of interest is school belonging. Kelly, thanks for joining me on the Happy Families podcast.
Absolute pleasure to be here with you, Justin.
So we've had lots of conversations over the years, Kelly, and talked about school belonging many times, but it's not a concept that a lot of people would automatically relate to or would have heard of. So let's break it up. First of all, what's belonging? All
right. Well, let's start off with, in the most simplest form, it's a universal fundamental human need. That means it's something that most of us really seek to find, and something that we all share universally, no matter where we are or who we are or where we live. The definition is an interesting one, and it can get a little bit murky depending on who is defining it.
You're sounding so much like an academic right now. Kylie gets me in trouble. I do this all the time. I'm like, Kylie, the definitions matter, and Kylie be like, no, just tell me what it is. I don't need all. Anyway, so where's right. The murkiness here? How do you define belonging from an academic point of view?
Well, let me break it down, and I'll try and be a little bit more plain language. It is about a feeling that you might have towards particular systems or families or friends. It might be school, it might be work environments, it might be communities, cultural group, or physical spaces like sense of belonging to land. So when I said before, it depends who you talk to, some people really see sense of belonging as being a really relational thing, in that it is about other people, whereas I feel, particularly being in Australia and having Indigenous culture all around us, that's a sense of belonging to kinship, but to land also, really needs to be acknowledged, I think, in how we define belonging. So that sense of place, I see as a really important part of how belonging is defined.
I really relate to that because, well, for the first 40 plus years of my life, I didn't. It didn't make any sense to me at all. But when my family left the Illawarra region, we left Wollongong and moved to Brisbane, I felt lost. I felt like I'd come adrift. My anchor had been ripped off the bottom of the ocean and I was just floating out there. And I remember in the couple of years following our move, every now and again I'd catch a flight from, say, Sydney to Canberra, or I'd fly across the Wollongong region, or even just flying into Sydney, and we'd go over the Royal National Park at the northern end of that Illawarra, and I would look out the window down into Wollongong with this yearning, but I belong there. I don't belong in Brisbane. I belong in Wollongong. So I guess that's what you're kind of saying. There's that sense of that feeling, that sense of affiliation, the yearning to be a part of something. That's how you're defining belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that because my background is, I used to be a school psychologist. And so one of the really common issues that students would come to me about is their sense of belonging to the school. They might have moved schools or changed schools, and exactly what you're describing is what they would say, that they don't feel like they belong here. And I had a supervisor at the time, because psychologists get supervision, and that, you know, she would use a plant analogy, that, you know, a plant has these deep roots that go into the soil, and, you know, they're ingrained and entwined, and they take time to grow and really establish themselves. But when you move, you are actually pulling that plant up. And, you know, when you do that, you know how the little roots kind of stay behind in the soil? They don't all come out. And then you have kind of less roots, and then you plant that plant again, and it takes time for those roots to regrow again. And I thought that there's such a beautiful metaphor for explaining to students and people that, you know, that sense of belonging can sometimes take time, particularly when you've transitioned to a new school or a new workplace, or you've physically moved.
Let's talk about the positive side of things here. If we look at why school belonging is important, what does your research show? Like, what are the key findings about kids who do feel like they belong?
We know school belonging is extremely important for mental health and their well-being, and also for successful school outcomes. Some exciting stuff, though, has looked at what it has meant for people to belong at school, and then tracked them 15 years down the track into adulthood. And that research there has found some really compelling findings to say that if you felt belonging at school, you were more likely to have better mental health outcomes as an adult, and also be more willing to engage in further education and training and employment. So there's some really exciting research happening there that shows longitudinal benefits as well, long-term benefits.
Kelly, thanks for sharing that. We're going to come right back after the break and have a conversation about what research tells us parents can do if their kids don't feel that sense of school belonging. That's next on the Happy Families podcast.
It's the Happy Families podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. Well, it's time for some answers. I'm talking with Dr. Kellyanne Allen. Kelly is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Education at Monash University, and also a senior honorary fellow at the Centre for Wellbeing Science in the Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne. We've been talking about what school belonging is and why it's so important that our kids feel that sense of affiliation, closeness and belonging, feeling like they matter, that they're accepted where they are at school. The reality is, though, Kelly, some kids really don't like school. They don't feel like they fit in. They feel like they actually don't even belong. So other than sending them to school, which is kind of important, what can we do to help them to build a healthy sense of school belonging?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I do need to say that there is not one single intervention or one single fix that can increase school belonging. This is a multi-pronged approach, and there are things that schools can be doing, particularly teachers can be doing, that aren't necessarily an add-on to the curriculum or their day-to-day. But from a parent perspective, there's also things that they can do as well. So, the first one is, showing an interest in their academics, showing an interest in their schoolwork, being around. And I know it can be so hard with our busy lives and different responsibilities that we have, but, making sure that we've got some time to listen to them read, or listen to, how their school day was, or see, what work they're working on at the moment. So that interest is really important as well. That also feeds into attitude towards school and having a positive attitude towards school, because as parents, some of us haven't had positive school experiences ourselves. We have to be really careful not to overlay negative attitudes towards school onto our children. We want to try and create a positive foundation for them. I know myself, I have to catch myself and stop myself from saying, yay, there's no school today. because I really want to try and make school the icing on the cake, the best place that my kids could possibly be at any one time, even though I personally love not packing the lunches and staying in pajamas all day. So that's probably the second one, is just to be mindful of attitudes that you might portray about school.
Just before you go on to the third one, Kelly, I just want to jump in on both of those if I can.
Yes.
In terms of the first idea, that involvement, the asking questions, I'm right there with you, and it's wonderful when your children want to talk to you about it. But what I have found is that when the kids don't feel like they really belong, when the kids aren't really enjoying their school experience, our conversations with them like, hey, how was school today? Or what was hard, or what was good, or what did you enjoy, or what did you learn? They tend to be met with monosyllabic responses. The kids say, fine, nothing, whatever. And that doesn't really matter whether the kids are 6 or 16. There's a real reluctance to talk about things when things just aren't that great. How do you, obviously you've got a school psychology background as well as doing all this great research on school belonging. How do parents get around that? How do you grapple with that from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I think it's being available and around, letting the kids know that you are actually there and you're interested is the first step, and perhaps even letting them come to things, they're in their own way, on their own terms. I think that's really important. I have always found that actually physically doing something with kids can sometimes be a helpful prompt for conversation. It's a little bit more natural. So those drives to and from school, or doing the dishes together, or sometimes I find that physically doing something. I don't know how you go about that, Justin, but sometimes I feel that can be a helpful way of drawing out information.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kelly. I find that sitting down with the kids and saying, you seem to be having a tough time, that simple statement seems to open things up for them so much. The second comment that you've made, the second idea to promote school belonging, is to be positive. And I have to be honest, I feel a little bit indicted by your statement, because I had an awful school experience. My years in high school particularly were primarily negative. My attitude towards school, even now, I value education so much, and we certainly encourage that with our kids. But from time to time, I find myself saying, only 4 more years to go, kiddo. You're almost through grade 8 now. You got 4.5 years. You're nearly there. And I love the fact that you've said that it's important to be positive. But I kind of want to challenge it just lightly, if I can. I know that this is your area of expertise, so I want to be very gentle with my gentle challenge. But surely, if we're not excited about it, our positivity comes across as false positivity. Like, the kids are going to see through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be genuine, and everything in balance. So, if you are waking up every morning as a parent and you're doing the school lunch boxes and nagging kids to get dressed, and the only messages that they're getting around school is that going to school is a drag, not just for them, but for you as well. That's probably, we need to take that, we need to balance that out perhaps, and think about what kind of messages we're sending kids. So there's they're not just only hearing negative.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what's the third tip for helping kids to feel a sense of school belonging, other than us being involved in their schooling and us being positive about the fact that they're going?
Yeah, it's about, I guess, being available to be supportive, not only just academically, but also emotionally when they need someone to talk. So you've got, showing an interest in school, you've got the positive attitude towards school, but then it's also being available to show support for their learning if they're struggling in particular, because that can result in negative school experiences as well.
So my last question, and our time is well and truly gone, but I think it's an important one that we need to address before we wrap things up. Sometimes kids just don't fit in, and it might not be the child, it might be the school, or it might be the child. How does a parent know when school belonging has become such an issue that it's time to find out if they might belong somewhere else rather than where they are?
I think at that point it's worth having a conversation with the school if parents are really concerned, because some of those feelings can be preliminary signs of things that that can cause more trouble down the track, like school refusal, for instance. So I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is that there are multiple spheres or multiple places that we can belong. You know, there might be other groups or other activities or friendship groups or family groups where students might find that sense of belonging as well. So thinking, if parents could think about the opportunities to belong that their child might have, that could be another helpful way of thinking about belonging.
Yeah, I love that thought. Dr. Kellyanne Allen from Monash University School of Education, thank you so much for talking to us about school belonging.
My pleasure, Justin.
I think the take-home message is be as positive about school as you can and make sure that you're involved and that you're there to listen. It sounds like that's going to make a huge difference for parents at home. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, and Craig Bruce is our executive producer. If you enjoy the podcast, we love it when you leave those 5-star ratings and reviews so everyone else can find out about the good stuff we talk about and help make their families happier. Oh, and if you'd like more info about making your family happier outside of the podcast, you can find it all at happyfamilies.com.au.